it's important to realize that the reform and opening that was formally adopted at the 13th Party Congress in December 1978 was not the result of congressional sanctions, not the result of an uprising from the populace, not an act of God. It was a conscious decision of the then leadership that was faced the reality that they had to reform and opening if they had any likelihood that the party state would continue. Our society, after all, came from people migrating from Europe to this vast open expanse of land, establishing small communities, and very begrudgingly over the years, allowing being willing to cede authority over the administration of affairs to increasingly higher levels and ultimately the national government of the United States. So just the obverse of the situation in China, where you started with a very highly integrated party state, with the leadership the source of that reform. You can understand why the different experiences of the two countries are so diametrically opposed, and why it's often very difficult for one side to understand the other. Because economics, politics, and social affairs in China were all of a piece in this unified party state, I used to have to explain or try to explain to people, well, China's had economic reform but not political reform. And they were confident of that distinction. Very apt, very appropriate in our own society. What was the decollectivization of agriculture? An economic reform, a political reform, or a social reform? It was all three of those. And most of the reforms that have occurred to disaggregate, deconcentrate this highly centralized party state have had political, economic, and social consequences, and cannot be easily compartmentalized into one of these three sectors of the society. The leadership from the very beginning of this process to this very day, in my judgment, have reflected their realization of the evident need for further reform, together with the concomitant desire to keep control over the process. John Lee's heard this before. What that has produced is alternating periods of restriction and relaxation. When they're confident that the things are going okay, the situation becomes more relaxed. When they're apprehensive about what's happening, they clamp down. You'll read in the paper repeatedly this year about how things have gone to hell in a handbasket. Everything's become much more restrictive, the press, otherwise. They have the anniversary of Tiananmen Square, they had the anniversary of the Tibetan revolt, they had the Olympics. The leadership's been very uneasy and very concerned about desire to keep control over the process so that further reforms can be effectively accomplished. And if you look secularly at what's been happening, you can see a fairly steady increase toward a more deconcentrated, more decentralized society in which there is increasing space for private energy initiative and more concrete evidence of what the consequences for all of us are of unleashing the innate talents and abilities of 1.3 billion people, whether it's professional basketball or music or the arts or 50 other areas of human activity, science, and technology that one could think of. The other challenge, or another challenge facing the leadership, is to grow as fast as possible, consistent with social stability and environmental sustainability. If they grow too fast, that can undermine social stability because of this increasing disparities in income. Similarly, if they don't go fast enough, society can be very unhappy about their failure to have their material life improved. Environmental sustainability, as you can see, the rapid growth has already had manifest harmful effects on the physical environment of China: air pollution, water pollution, hazardous waste disposal, whatever. So they have to be increasingly conscious of that constraint on how fast they grow and the nature of the growth that they pursue. But it isn't one of these things that they're growing there's no qualifiers on how fast they grow, or they're growing as fast as possible. There are these other constraints on that that challenge the leadership to find that balance between those various considerations. We can all be asked to predict how long China will successfully maintain this period of reform. And I'd be the last one, I don't think anyone is to guarantee that it's an escalator to heaven. But you can say that we now have a 30-year history in which they've, with relative effectiveness, maintained progress in ways that have included substantial increase in private space. You know, earlier your Danwei determined who you married, where you lived, was the source of the food you got. You couldn't travel outside your own community, certainly not international. You didn't have the internet to listen to, or the television to watch, or any newspaper or access to information other than what the government put out. That's changed in ways dramatically, I think, for anybody who's seen it over that length of time. And it helps us, I think we probably, like most Chinese, measure their current situation against what it used to be, rather than comparatively. So they don't look, first off, with envy at the United States and all the privileges and freedoms and likewise that we enjoy. They think that they're better off than they used to be. And that helps to account for the fact that most public opinion polls, I think certainly one can accept the validity of them, show substantial support for the national government. It isn't that there's large bubbling up of unrest focused on Beijing. The unrest that's reported with increasing frequency is against what local officials do, which they have much more direct contact when their land is taken or something else happens that adversely affects their immediate interests and concerns. So there's more inherent stability than some of the interpretation that is given to the reports of the number of incidents or the tragic imprisonment of a dissident or other negative factors that appear. My own hope would be that or maybe put differently, that we should measure the progress of China in terms of the degree to which the institutions that would be necessary to underpin a more open political system are being strengthened and developed. And that process will proceed far enough so that if and when the party state is no longer maintained, that is, where there is open elections or there's more formal Western democratic political forms are introduced, the underlying institutions to make that system function effectively will be in place. So you watch what's happening to the legal system, how the legislature plays an increasingly important role, professionalization of the bureaucracy, the degree to which information is more readily available and not monolithic in this context. Those are the factors that, at least to me, are most important to try to monitor in judging the likely political outcomes of reform and opening. The only thing I'd say positively, it is important for us as the United States to show by example the virtues we see inherent in democracy and human rights. But to use those terms in the Chinese context only is likely to lead to kind of confrontational discussions that don't prove to be very productive. But if we are all interested in a China that is more productive, more just and humane, I think we can agree on both sides with the values we would like to see both societies increasingly represent and reflect in their everyday behavior. Fascinating place. Our first office was in the Django Fondien, so references to that. I was there for 10 days in February and a week in November, and I'll be back again for 5 days in early July. I go back just because, it was so customary now, so easy, even though it's not the fanciest hotel in Beijing. It works very well over all these years, and send you provide lots of Justine's restaurant is still there and serving good dinners and the like. And I hope all of you will have a chance, if you haven't had the opportunity, to see the extraordinary change. Well, you won't necessarily have a comparative basis for seeing the change, but just to see what modern China is these days, if you haven't already had the chance to do so. Thanks.